Tejal, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice.
Long time in the works.
I'm sorry?
This is a long time in the works. We've been trying to make this happen for a little bit. It's finally happening. I'm really excited about this.
Me too. Me too.
So before we dive in to probably a pretty big topic here, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? What's your connection to the industry?
Sure. So my name is Tejal Patel. I am a third-generation hotelier, born and raised in the industry. I have, and that's by choice, where my career has still followed into hospitality. I went to school at the University of Houston, where I studied hotel and restaurant management. I graduated in 2014. And throughout my career, ever since I was legally able to work, I've worked in different areas of the industry, such as hotels and restaurants, and I worked in operations and consulting, and events. And so a few years ago, I decided to come back to the family business. I hated it, and then I left again, and then I came back, but I came back on my own terms. And so in late 2019, I created my company called Neem Hospitality, which is a development, investment, and consulting company. And then the pandemic hit, and it's been a bit of a slow process to get things ramped up, but now I'm here. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I mean, it's interesting that you say, you came back on your own terms, and that's really a good segue into what we're going to talk about a little bit today. With so many people are in the industry, they've been in the industry for so long, have experienced a lot over the last, let's just call it 2 years, or a year and a half with the pandemic, myself included. And a lot of us, I think, are trying to figure out, what does the next chapter in this industry look like for us? And through the pandemic, I've been talking a lot, along with like a lot of other people who are maybe not brand affiliated, who were still employed through the pandemic, traditionally employed, have been talking about a lot of the cultural issues in the industry that we all know are a problem, whether it's said or unsaid. Hours, ability to take vacation time, picking up and moving your entire life over the course of a weekend to like a completely different side of the country. Being trying to get on a fast track for promotions and never being able to get there, how work is graded, vanity metrics that kind of grade how well you're doing in your property. Like I could just list things for half an hour. I'm curious to get your thoughts on where are we at right now with this? And you're connected to the industry pretty deeply. What are you seeing out there?
I'm seeing that this issue with culture and employees not being happy within our industry, or even just the fact that we have labor shortages, it's nothing new. I think way before the pandemic, we've been seeing these issues have been topics of conversation, but it didn't really hit hard until the pandemic. And now that we're in this recovery phase, it's getting a lot harder to bounce back. I mean, despite the fact that our industry has come back quicker than we expected, we don't have the people there to help us and support us in that. And so with that being said, I think the one thing that we learned during this pandemic was to innovate. And this is the word of the century, and I'm so tired of hearing it, but pivot. So for lack of a better word, we had to learn to pivot and think of new different ideas. And now we still need to work on that and build it to the next level. So what does that mean? In my opinion, I think it means that we need to change the way our hospitality leadership is. Traditionally, it's been very bureaucratic. It's been a little bit transactional, right? From what you mentioned about the vanity metrics and how it's hard to get promotions. So now we need to shift it into becoming more a transformational leadership. Because that's essentially what's going to help, or that's essentially what's going to keep your employees happy and honestly stay with you and feel like they're bringing value. So that's where I think I'm at. Do I think that it's going to happen overnight? No, I think it's that's an effort that's going to have to be done at, every specific company, establishment, big hotel or small hotel. It's something that leadership is going to have to be proactive in implementing.
Really great thoughts. I agree with you across the board there. The thing that has always frustrated me is that things in the industry are slow to change. It's like turning a tanker ship. It just takes forever. It takes an immense amount of energy and in some cases political will to want to do it. Or, maybe there's if you can figure out what the ROI is on it, like if you could put a real dollar to the ROI, then, you figure out sometimes if the juice is worth the squeeze. Mm-hmm. So, we've got that. You've got the situation where many hotel companies and managers don't feel comfortable being at the tip of the spear. They don't want to lead the change. They want to see how it works for other people. And then if they can follow suit, and usually what happens is the big guys will do it. And then everybody's like, okay, well, Marriott's doing it, so it's safe for us to go ahead and do it, by and large. And then you've got the situation where if somebody's job isn't dependent on them changing their thinking or behavior, if they've always been successful doing it one way, what is the incentive and even the willingness to go through those hard changes mentally, psychologically? They don't get pushed to do it. And what I've been saying kind of along the way is this is almost like it's going to take a mid-level management push to really move the needle. I don't necessarily at a macro level believe that it's going to happen at the highest levels within the hospitality kind of corporate mega structure as it were.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's typically the people who are at the top, right? They're the experienced people. And then at the bottom, right, you have, sometimes they're younger, so they're hungrier. They have talent, right? They're booming with talent. But then when you get to the mid-level, it's such a unique place to be at because you have a combination of both. And so, I mean, in my opinion, it's going to take the mid-level management in all different areas, right? Like mid-level, whether it's in hotel management specifically or in the operations side, or even if you're like a developer, real estate person, and, it's going to take the middle level management to kind of make all these gears work a little bit better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. No, it does. And again, bringing up the point about development and investors and brands, and like there are a lot of stakeholders in the pool, and the ownership piece, I think, is the one that's seen the most transformation over the last, let's call it 10 years, where a lot more, whether it's institutional money, it's private investors, it's the, I'll use air quotes around this, it's the MBA class that come in as asset managers that have never really worked in a hotel before, that have to justify their existence to the ownership group by, doing it kind of against the brand or the management company. Like they have to show value there, right? And I have an MBA, so I can, I understand the thinking.
I'm getting
You're
one.
getting one, yeah. So you kind of get. I don't mean to disparage the degree, but the point is that this is an industry that's always, because it's so personal and it's all about connecting with people. It's very hard to run it from a spreadsheet, and it's very hard sometimes when you're in a meeting with an ownership group or an asset manager to articulate in real terms the psychological benefits of doing X, Y, and Z and how that translates, like what the ROI is on that. Those are very hard things to like get your arms around and articulate.
It's hard to quantify and even just to, prove the point of like why things should change in this way or that way. Like, for example, a lot of conversations we've had in recent years is about diversity, right? I mean, yeah, it sounds like having an inclusive and equitable environment seems like the most ethical and right thing to do. But at the same time, what an owner investor is going to be like, well, what's my ROI on this? If it's not making money, it's not making sense.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So it's really hard to quantify those things, really. And it's the point you bring about ownership. I mean, that hits really hard for me because I'm transitioning into that side, or I am already on that side. But I've grown up in a family of entrepreneurs and hotel owners, but we've all worked up our way within the hotel to get to that other side. And what I've seen in the last I would say in the last decade, is we've seen so much new hotel assets, right, popping up out of nowhere. And I think that today's owners, most of them, not everyone, they are really just treating it like a real estate asset, but they're not exactly being mindful of the fact that there's a particular service, a particular industry that is based off of something that isn't really transactional, that's going on inside that piece of real estate.
Yeah,
and so you can't treat it the same way as you would like a strip center,
right,
or something, or,
Yeah,
so.
it's true. It's true. There's something, I was actually thinking about this before we started recording, that one of the difficult things of working in the industry for a long time is that it's almost like a bottomless pit of giving. It never ends. You literally, and this is, I think, why the burnout rate is pretty high, is that it's right?
draining.
It is. And you give and give and give and give. That is your job every day. And it doesn't matter what level, what position you're in. You're either doing it for guests, or you're doing it for employees, or you're doing it for owners, or you're doing it for all three, or the brand. And what that does over time, I think, is it conditions those on the property to I'm not going to articulate. This is a new thought, so I'm articulating it as I'm talking here. But like it conditions you on the property. It becomes this like natural reflex, this sort of muscle memory that eventually that is just the thing that you do. It becomes the right thing to do, and it feels good, and then you like doing it even though you're burnt out. Like there's that whole thing. But again, it goes back to when it's hard to articulate a feeling and a benefit to somebody that doesn't feel it or see the benefit
into a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah. And I think that might be the kind of the crux of what we're talking about here, is that there has to be a meeting in the middle, and there has to be a willingness on the side of an ownership group to understand there's a story behind the numbers. It's up to the management company to be able to articulate that in a way that's not just like, throwing a temper tantrum. And I feel like right now it's a bit of a gap to bridge.
Absolutely. And especially, we're just coming out of this pandemic that has literally ravaged our industry. So we got to think about the priorities that all these different stakeholders have. So for example, for employees working in the hotels, who are actually working in the hotels, their priority is literally just trying to get by and, get their day-to-day jobs going, get their careers back in track. Management companies, their job is to open their doors again, right? Their goal is to open their doors again and get back to ramping up. And then owners, most owners, they're trying to get some relief, if anything, because their profits have really just completely shrunk over this period. And now they got to think about, how am I going to pay back my mortgage? How am I going to get my loans forgiven, or my idle stuff? So that's like right now that's the number one priority for all these different people.
Yeah.
So,
and what's more important, right? It depends who you ask. You need the money to keep the doors open. You need the doors to be open to keep people working, or to keep guests coming in, to keep people working. And you need to provide an incredible environment, especially now where recruiting is very difficult, where not only do you want to attract people to come and work at your property, I think that your recruiting strategy starts with a retention strategy. And right, so what are you doing to make sure that the people that are still there want to stay and aren't going to be pulled away by a $200 signing bonus, and then they just end up skipping around town, going to every hotel every 3 months, getting that sign up bonus. There's a lot of work to do.
It's so much work, and and that's where it comes down to having a strategic plan. And I would say, this is probably not the best solution. Again, I'm not going to be able to articulate it because this is a new thought, but I think it's just everyone literally just need to sit down together. Even for each individual hotel, and just figure out some sort of plan for each asset or whatever in your portfolio. Because if we're just looking out for our own company's benefit, what I mean is, for example, say I was an owner, I hired you, right, to run one of my hotels and stuff. And if you're just focused on the thing I talked about, which is just ramping up, taking care of employees, and I'm just focused on paying my loans back, and I don't give a a shit about what you're doing, just make me some money, then we're always going to be in this
Let it
like
out.
vicious cycle. And this thing happens all the time. Earlier I talked about transformational leadership.
Yeah.
And so I read this study from the early 90s. And so that topic came up, and it was the same issues then, the same issues going on now were happening then. Labor shortages, a lot of development was happening, and culture was an issue. And so the interesting thing that article said was like things were a little bit more transactional up until now, but because we're having these issues, we need to, shift into transformational. And I think we saw our industry, do better, but now we're dipping again, so you've got to change your strategies in whatever ways you can. And I know it sounds like I'm just repeating myself, but I just think it's so important. So.
It totally is. Yeah. We're at this inflection point where we still have the ability and the presence of mind to address these things. We will very quickly get to a point where it's too busy to make happen. Just like I was talking to my wife the other day about, it's a buyer's or seller's market or buyer's market about job seekers right now. It's going to be very short-lived, right? At some point, things will sort of revert back to a version of what they were before the pandemic.
I had that same conversation. I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Because
I got really excited.
No, I was just gonna say because the will is there. The will is there.
We all talk about it, right? It's so easy to like talk and complain about the problems and the issues and give very educated answers on what we can do and how to do it. But there's no point in talking about it if we're not actually going to do it, and it's always the same thing we're saying over and over again. And like, for example, like when I said earlier that we were dealing with labor shortages before the pandemic even happened, right? But we were just talking about it. What were we doing to combat it, And I'm guilty of this, I'm guilty of like saying this is a problem, but not really actively finding a solution. And, and the topic that you just spoke of, like talking to your wife about, like, we're going to quickly go back to a period of stagnation, even though things have built up. I was having a conversation with one of my partners the other day, and they were saying that, oh, wow, like summer's crazy. Summer's booming. Like this whole recovery thing that they said we won't get until like 23 or 24, like that's not possible. And it's like, summer is summer. Like, wait until fall starts, and we're going to be back to where we started.
Yeah. That's exactly right. There's so many unknowns right now about travel. We don't know how business travel is going to come back and group travel. And sure, there's anecdotal stories about different parts of the country where that's happening. There's also huge swaths of the country that are highly dependent on tech company travel, like the entire West Coast where I live, where a lot of these companies are saying, we're going to hybrid work environment, minimal work travel, like continuing down the road that we've been dealing with now for, the better part of a year. Long way of saying that we don't know how this is all going to shake out. So the summer travel bump was 100% predictable, 100%. That's going to go away in September when everybody's back in school, right? So it's...
I was thinking, it'd be interesting to see, because right now we're all like, we can't find people. And then like when fall comes up, I'm going to be like, well, are we going to have too many people then? And then are you going to fire them again? Like...
The really good question, though. We've got to be.
You got to be vigilant.
I'm glad you brought that up. Because are you freaking out in your hotel right now because you don't have anybody that can work? But is that a short-lived
I'm freaking out because I'm like, okay, yeah, like right now, it's hard for me to find people, but I'm as an owner, I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm doing front desk and helping strip rooms and stuff. So I'm there to, be a little bit more proactive. I can be that extra hand. But then it's like, I'm freaking out because what am I going to do when fall comes up and I have about 4 months left in the year? And for me, at least, and every market's different, from where I'm at, it is really, really hard to get your business going in like the last few months of the year, So like, then what am I going to do? Because then if I already have people on staff, like, are they going to feel like I got to let them go? Like, that's what's like freaking me out.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And it's hard to have visibility on what's going to happen later in the year, right? So that unknown just creates a whole bunch of anxiety and panic and right. Yeah. I want to be specific in giving some things that I think hotels, from a recruiting perspective, if they're not looking at it right now, they may want to look at in terms of going above and beyond the hiring the hiring bonus, whatever it is, $200, $1,000, whatever it is, an extra couple bucks an hour. Great. And, you advertise your suite of great benefits and all these things like that. That is, everybody's doing that. And one of the reasons that nobody really is getting any traction is because everybody's doing the same thing. Back to my point earlier is that there are very few hotels that want to be tip of the spear and try something truly different. And some of the things that I've been thinking about how to bring into a hotel, and I'm an operations guy. I mean, I spent years making schedules, hiring people, figuring out job duties, train, all of this stuff. So I see both sides of this. And some areas I think that we need to be starting to play around with are things like, can you do better on a 3-day or a 4-day work week, but still give somebody full-time hours? So they still get their 40 hours a week, but maybe they do it over 3 12-hour, well, that wouldn't be 40 hours, but 3 12-hour days over 3 days, or 4 10-hour days, whatever that system is. Benefits that are inclusive of other family members, or maybe getting rid of the employee portion of benefits. True cross-training opportunities within properties so that people can get exposure to other areas. Promoting, this is a thing actually that I've heard Facebook does that I think is brilliant, where they give you a certain number of hours is it quarterly, monthly, yearly? I'm not sure. Where you can work on your own side hustle. You can work on a project that is meaningful to you, and you can do it on the company time. That's the kind of thinking. And that's not going to be applicable to everybody. The 25-year career housekeeper probably just, that may not work. But you know what? There's a lot of up and coming young people working at the front desk or working in supervisory roles where things like that might really resonate with them. But at the same time, don't just sit in your office beating your head against the wall trying to come up with the next great thing that you think is a great idea that people are going to resonate with. Ask your team.
No brainer.
No brainer.
When you're saying right? All these benefits and stuff, everyone's doing it. Well, it's yeah, okay. Well, then how about this, guys? Why don't you actually see if these are the benefits that people are wanting? The big thing in our industry is empathy, right? That's how we do our day-to-day, business. Whenever we're taking care of our guests, is we lead with empathy. And so I try to think what would I have wanted when I was this person in their life, wherever they are, or even especially when I was a young person coming in. And the thing that was super important for me was a couple of things, just the opportunity to learn, and then also to get some mentorship out of it, and I think those are the two things, especially mentorship. That's really going to make people feel like they can stay and they can grow. And, sometimes people, when they go into a job, they just go into it, it's it's just a job. It's a way for me to make my ends meet, for me to put food on the table. And I can respect that. But then as a manager, you can still inspire your people to think of it in a different way, that yes, this is a career. This is something where, yeah, it's helping me put food on the table, but this is also a career that I can grow in. And I can be someone in.
Yeah, completely. Those were some of the most frustrating things when I was coming up. I remember when I finally got into my first assistant manager job after trying for a while. And looking back on it, was I ready for it at all of the other times that I applied? I mean, probably not. Maybe I was. I don't know. It's really hard to say. It was a while ago. But some of the things that I remember would have been so helpful would have been, I hesitate to say the word guarantee, because a lot of things would need to fall in place for it to happen, but a very clear path of progression through, so I knew what I was working towards. If you're in martial arts, or you're you play team sports, you sort of know what you need to do to get to the next level, how you need to perform. There's a certain whatever you're trying to do. There's a clear path through. We don't have that. It's really just Is it, do you do this job long enough and then like you're the best server in the restaurant, so you become a supervisor? Or if you're really dedicating yourself to the industry, there's a lot of people that have been doing it a long time that, in spite of their desire, never get beyond a certain level, right? And I look at that in one respect as like that could be a fault and a failure on the brand or the management or the ownership, whatever the structure is aside, because maybe this person's getting passed up for promotion time and again, and they're just not given the tools to effectively develop themselves to be able to take on the next role, even if maybe they have the talent to do it, which is a whole other discussion.
No, I agree. And so I disagree and agree with you on what you said about how we don't have a clear path. Like, for example, like we don't really know what the next step is. And I'm going to say I disagree in a way, because if you have no idea, like going into it, then yeah, of course, I think for most of us who like went to who have learned hospitality, grew up in it, they go into it and they know, okay, like, this is what I got to do and this is what I got to do. But like typically the average person who doesn't have this background, they don't really know. With that being said, companies like, for example, like Hilton and Marriott and all them, right? Like, I don't know if maybe your training was a little bit different, but when I got hired by Hilton, we had like 2 or 3 weeks of like these online videos and trainings and stuff we had to do. And so like they would share that with us, right, in that little thing. And then you get your completion certificate at the end. And that was it. Like I didn't hear about it ever again from the managers, So it's like, and like, when it comes down to like all these trainings and these new ideas and how things are going to work, like it's literally like, like when you study for a test, you're literally just studying to remember what could be on the test and then you forget it, and that's kind of like what it is. Yep. So, yeah, I totally just went off on a tangent there. I apologize, but
no, you're right though. You're definitely right. And I think the point of kind of this whole section of conversation is that obviously there's no one size fits all, but there's also no single solution.
I think that it's like I hate to tie everything back to the beginning of our conversation, but it comes down to everyone making some time and efforts to make it better. And even as employees, right? Like sometimes it's hard for us, right, to communicate what we need from our managers. But like if you want mentorship, be someone to ask. Now, maybe your manager could be like a sucky person and they're just probably like, keep you where you're at. I've worked for people like that, but maybe you could open your own leadership's eyes, and they might understand where you're coming from and that might influence them to make some change, And so like, I always consider like employees as like talent, they're talented team members. So I have the talent, but my talent needs to be cultivated, right? But I need my superiors to help me cultivate that.
Yeah. I like that you said that. It's you have to be your own advocate, but there has to be if that's the environment that you want to create in your company, you have to be willing to allow people to be their own advocates. And
yes, yeah. You have to empower them. Like you have to empower your team and the people in your organization. And if you haven't had that culture from the beginning and, you got to make the change, it's not going to happen just because you say it. Like it's going to take some work.
Yeah. And back to the point, near the beginning of the show is that if your job as a senior leader has always been predicated, or your success in your job is predicated on not recognizing that these things are problems, you're going to have a hard time seeing that there's an issue going on, or you're going to have a hard time changing your thinking in how to approach all of this. And so that's why I think it's so critical, again, not to call back, but I think it just underscores the last like 30 minutes here. It's good. It has to start at the mid-level.
I think that one of the things that I had this amazing professor at U of H, so Dr. Stephen Barth, and he taught, or he still teaches the hospitality leadership class, and he did this one lecture. It changed my life. It literally even changed what I want to do in my career, and it's about emotional intelligence. I've seen people who are like super duper experienced. They like worked in a certain, field or career for like 40 years or whatever, right? but they're so adaptable. They exercise emotional intelligence, and they're phenomenal, and they're at the top of the game. But then I see people are at the top of the game, and they're like what we said earlier, just they don't want to be at the tip of the spear. We've already done this. Like they don't want to change. So, and I think like it takes having emotional intelligence, having that skill, and that not everyone is born with it. Not everyone can even cultivate it, but that I think having that really does push the needle forward.
I couldn't agree with you more. Before we wrap the show, I want to get your thoughts on something here. So you're about to be a new hotel owner. Huge. Congratulations. This is amazing. You're living my dream. So
I'm
one
living
day,
my dream. I wanted this forever.
You're living your dream. Yeah. I'd love to.
I've been working with owners and like advising owners for so long. So now it's like, yay, I got a little piece of a pie. I don't want to eat it.
It's going to be incredible. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on, you're kind of coming into ownership during, again, an interesting time. We just spent a half hour talking about it. So there's so many questions to ask, but I guess to just sort of do a succinct section here, what are your thoughts in balancing everything that we've just talked about today with a piece of real estate that you're now responsible for?
That's great. Yeah, no, I think the one thing to a closing point that I think we can both agree on with everything we've talked about and suggested and gave ideas on is that it's not going to work for every single type of hotel at all. Like the thing when you said like Facebook allows people on company time to work on their side hustle, I was like, I can't do that. Like I can't. And that's because I'm not at that level, to be able to offer that. So things like mentorship, right? Things like cultivating my talent. Those are little things I can do at my property, right? I can do to cultivate. I don't have to just cultivate my talent, but I can cultivate my culture that I want to have. Because I'm not going to stop at one hotel. Like I have dreams to have multiple properties and expand Neem Tree and go beyond. And so it's going to start here for me. And so just those are the two things that I can think of like right off the bat. And then also things like diversity and equity and inclusion, that's also a no-brainer for me. And that's something that I can bring into it. Mm-hmm. I come from a family of operators, so that's in my blood. I've operated one of our family hotels, and one of my things was like, my philosophy was like, I don't want you to stay here forever. Mm-hmm. Like I want you to be better. I want you to go somewhere else and work after you feel like you've gotten what you needed here. And that's something that I can continue to do. So that's how I'm going to try to balance that. Again, that's a bit easier for me to do because I don't have like 50 people who are going to be working for me at that one hotel. Yeah. It's going to be me and the family and then a couple, like maybe like 5 other people I could bring in from outside. So it's easy to do that. But yeah, we'll see when I have my 5 big luxury hotels, what I'll do then, but I don't want 5 luxury.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, I guess the point is that there's no one size fits all solution here. Yeah. Everybody's property, they will always tell you their hotel is different. And that works there, but my place is different. And
that's okay.
And that's
okay. Find something that can work for you.
100%. There will be something. Thinking outside the box and talking to your people and figuring things out for your specific use case. The point is just take action. You got to do something. Yeah.
And don't just leave it at that. Like, don't just like ask just to ask, right? Like, it's hard to create that inspiration in people, but it's got to start somewhere.
That's worse. If you ask and don't do, like, just don't ask. If you have no intentions of doing anything, then just don't even do it.
Yes. That's another one. No, because that reminds me, like, I don't know if you have this situation, but I've had like performance evaluations or whatever where I'm going to evaluate, but then I can provide my feedback and then I give the feedback and then like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. We'll do that. And then nothing. And it's like, so well, then why'd you ask me what can we do to be better if you're not going to even do anything?
Exactly. Yeah, it's true.
Or at least tell me why you can't do it so I understand. But yeah, so.
Yeah, no, man, that'll be episode 2.
I know. Accountability.
Accountability, exactly. Tejal, this was great. Thank you for being on the show, giving some insight. If anybody wants to learn more about you, where should they go?
They can go on LinkedIn. I will apologize ahead of time because if you do message me, it does take me some time to get back, but that is still one of the best ways to get in touch with me. But also I'm available by email. And I think Adam will share those links in the post show. So yeah.
100%. Yeah, it'll be just down in the show notes, links to everything for sure.
I'm pretty accessible, I like to think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, best of luck with the hotel and a lot of great things on the horizon for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for this opportunity. And I hope that your listeners found value. So thank you.
Anytime.